Hey guys, Harvey Cthulhu here. I just want to say that since the last time I spoke, more people have gotten unsubscribed from Doomcock's channel without any warning. Please check your subscriptions and make sure that you are still subscribed. Otherwise, they're going to just shrink his channel. Thank you, and have a pleasant weekend.
Alert, alert, this is a Doomcock News alert. Alert, alert, this is a Doomcock News alert.
Greetings, my friends. I am Dictor Van Doomcock, the future ruler of Earth, and I am here with some Star Trek Discovery news. Other than the fact that the woke are destroying freedom of expression and freedom of thought by extension, the woke are seemingly also hell-bent on destroying each other. Walter Mosley, an African-American writer on staff at Star Trek Discovery, was recently chastised and driven out of the Star Trek Discovery writing room when he used the N-word in a discussion relating an anecdote that occurred in real life. He was not simply dropping N-bombs. He was conveying something that actually happened to him in his experience as an African-American man in the United States today. He was a black man using the N-word in conjunction with something that happened to him in reality. Sadly, reality is no defense in the trials of the SJW court. We have known for a long time that the Star Trek Discovery production is not a happy place to work. Don't forget that the original showrunners of Star Trek Discovery, Aaron Harberts and Gretchen Berg, were fired in June of 2018 just before Season 2 production began. Their leadership and operational issues allegedly led to their dismissal. Insiders stress that these people were abusive to the Discovery writing staff, with Harberts actually being accused of leaning across the writer's room table, shouting expletives at a member of the show's writing staff. Multiple writers were uncomfortable working under their leadership. They filed complaints with HR, and so they were dismissed, leading to Kurtzman coming in and taking the reins of the troubled production. But this is different. This was an African-American man using the N-word, quoting an officer of the LAPD who stated that, quote, "On the streets of Los Angeles, he stopped all N-words in Patty neighborhoods and all Patties in N-word neighborhoods because they were usually up to no good." According to Mr. Mosley, he was telling a true story as he remembered it. He did not apply the slur to anyone in the room. He was not using it liberally or for comedic effect. He was quoting an officer, and it was important for the story that he get that quote correct. According to Mosley, and I quote his own article in the New York Times, quote, "Earlier this year, I just finished with the Snowfall Writers' Room for the season when I took a similar job on a different show at a different network. I'd been in the new room for a few weeks when I got a call from Human Resources. A pleasant-sounding young man said, 'Mr. Mosley, it has been reported that you used the N-word in the writer's room.' I replied, 'I am the N-word in the writer's room.' Mosley was informed by HR that while he could write the word, he could not say the word. This did not sit well with Mr. Mosley. Quote, 'There I was, a black man in America who shares with millions of others the history of racism, and more often than not, treated as subhuman. If addressed at all, that history had to be rendered in words my employers regarded as acceptable. There I was being chastised for criticizing the word that oppressed me and mine for centuries. As far as I know, the word is in the dictionary. As far as I know, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence assure me of both the freedom of speech and the pursuit of happiness.' It appears that Mr. Mosley has bumped up against the limits of SJW Hollywood. It is perfectly all right to make a show with quotas, a show that is woke as hell, a show that eschews narrative integrity for wokeitude, for the promotion of certain propagandistic extremist ideas of what society and America should be. But sadly, those noble leftist ideas that they are espousing do not apply in real life to an actual man of color who is expressing his truth in his own language, as is his goddamn right. Because you see, the SJWs feed on each other. The SJW situation right now is somewhat akin to the situation in Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union at the height of totalitarianism, when you never knew if your neighbor or your relative or your own children were going to inform on your casual, relaxed unorthodoxy to the powers that be. Children would turn in their parents to the Nazis, to the Soviets. Your own spouse might sell you out to the authorities. And the same thing is going on now with the thought police that are the SJWs. Mosley knew this, and that is why he ultimately decided to leave Star Trek Discovery. He says, quote, "My answer to HR was to resign and move on. I was in a writer's room trying to be creative while at the same time being surveilled by unknown critics who would snitch on me to a disembodied voice over the phone. My every word would be scrutinized. Sooner or later, I'd be fired or worse, silenced. Welcome to the struggle, Mr. Mosley. The struggle for freedom of expression, the struggle for freedom of thought. Never mind all the quality issues I have with Star Trek Disgracery, all the horrid things that they are doing to the franchise, basically murdering it and then sodomizing its corpse for profit on CBS All Access. I have documented all that amply, but what I have not documented prior to this is the toxic nature of the SJW culture at CBS and in the Star Trek Discovery writer's room, where a man can be silenced, ostracized for speaking truth, for expressing an actual incident that happened in reality to him, his life experience in his own language. That is the boat Mr. Mosley was in. That is the boat that we are all in. We are in a goddamn McCarthyian nightmare, an SJW-born totalitarianism, wherein on social media, in real life, on the streets, in our offices, in our very homes, we are not free to speak our minds in the language that we would choose. Our thoughts, our ideas, our language are controlled. Control a man's language and you control his very mind. One of the reasons why Dave Chappelle's Stick and Stone special on Netflix was such a cultural cannon shot across the SJW bow was because watching it, I remembered what it felt like to be free. To be free in a room with adults who are not going to melt over the use of a word here or a word there or a concept that we are not supposed to think anymore. And I think that Dave Chappelle's special was such an incredible blow struck for the right of freedom of speech and freedom of thought is because to be free, a man must first remember what it felt like to be free. Remembering a time when you could speak your mind without being swarmed by SJW clones online is to remember what it was like to be free. Mr. Mosley freed himself from that horrible situation in the STD writer's room, and he ended his op-ed in the New York Times very eloquently. He said, "The worst thing you can do to citizens of a democratic nation is to silence them. And the easiest way to silence a woman or a man is to threaten his or her livelihood. Let's not accept the McCarthyism of secret condemnation. Instead, let's delve a little deeper, limiting the power that can be exerted over our citizens, their attempts to express their hearts and horrors, and their desire to speak their truths. Only this can open the dialogue of change." Walter Mosley, Dave Chappelle, two men of color boldly speaking out in support of freedom. I have been speaking my mind very candidly all along, fighting in my own way for these very freedoms. I am hoping that others will heed the call and join the struggle. From the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomcock bidding you all, my friends, remember freedom.